stream. There we go. Hey, good afternoon, everybody, or evening, or early morning, depending on where you're calling from. I am Kim Hamer, founder of 100 Acts of Love, and I'm so glad to be here with you today. I have a sort of a special, it's not really special, but is kind of special. Let me just make sure the sound is on here because I can't hear myself. I have a special thing to talk about today. So I'm going to talk about my husband and my late husband and the 3 lessons that he taught me that I actually, it was really funny, surprisingly, follow him, like have incorporated it into my own life. All right, I don't think, let me unmute. All right, I'm not sure I'm being heard, but we'll just kind of go with it. And if not, we'll just redo another one. So, yeah, great to be here. So, I'm going to talk about art. And I love talking about art. And it's funny because when people ask me, like, why do you talk about him so much? Or there we go. Okay, this is much better. Sometimes people think, there's a lot of stereotypes about what widows do and are, and especially when we're young widows. And I was very young when he died. And there's these stereotypes of like widows always being sad and always longing for their late person, right? Or widowers, or even people who lose children. And it's sort of a little disappointing because when I talk about my husband, my late husband, people will be like, "Oh, you shouldn't talk about him because it's just too sad for you." Or it feels like lately I've been dating, and when I speak about my late husband, it's one guy even said, "Seems like you still miss him." And it's like, "No, I was sharing the story about what we did because you asked me a question and I'm answering it, and I can't answer it without including him in the story." So there's this idea that widows are always longing and just pining for their person, and while sometimes it's true, sometimes I really do miss him and want him back, it's been 13 years. And so I have this whole life that he has never been a part of. And so I just want people to kind of know that. So when I talk about him, when I like to talk about him, I bring back these happy memories of who he was for me and how we were. And of course, like all memories, the bad ones tend to fade, right? So I don't remember the times we fought. I do remember some of them, but I don't remember a lot of the times we fought or anything. So, it's nice to bring back those memories. And y'all, I was married for 13 years. It's really good to know that I was really loved. And there's a great amount of confidence in knowing that someone loved you in all your craziness. And trust me, y'all, I was a little crazy. All right. So I want to talk about the 3 lessons that my husband taught me. And I've got some notes over here. Art and I were married for 14 years, 3 months, and 29 days. And I honestly didn't know. I knew it was 14 years and a few months, but I didn't know the number of days until a few days ago when I counted. Now, maybe in the beginning I knew, but I have long forgotten it. So I was counting because I'm going to be doing something special this year because I'm going to be hitting the anniversary where I will have been without him, without being married to him longer than I will have been married to him. So, during that time when we were married, there were lots of things that we learned from each other, right? You can't have a marriage and not take in things. But it's funny because when I think about it, I often think that there are, like, I just didn't think about all the things that I was really learning about him or taking in as part of myself. And yeah, and so, I don't think when I look back at it, I don't think that I adopted anything that he said or did, but I really did. But after he died, and it wasn't after he died, it took years after he died, I found myself sort of just pulling these little pieces of him that became parts of me. And there's so many more than just 3, but there are 3 that come up every single day, every single day. Now, I do wanna be clear. When these things come up, again, it's not like I'm like, "Oh, poor me, my husband. I'm gonna live out what he taught me so I can be a better human being so he can remain in my memory forever." No, that's not what I'm doing. It's more of like It's like when a friend and you have this really funny saying together and you forget about it, then you remember it and it makes you happy, right? It just makes you happy. So it's more along the lines of that rather than pining. Um, so I do want to talk about the lessons didn't come all at once to me. It wasn't like one day I woke up and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna carry out these 3 lessons that my husband taught me for the rest of my life." They came at varying times to the best of my memory. They came, like one of them came recently. Um, but they don't, they didn't come all at once. It wasn't like he died and I went to carry on his legacy by doing these things in the world. It wasn't anything as abrupt as that or as maybe even nice as that. But these lessons, and these lessons aren't groundbreaking. I'm gonna share them with you, and you're gonna be like, "Yeah, well, duh, Kim," in some places. But what I often find is, the lessons that we learn in our life, we know them, have to know them in two places in order to act on them. The first place we have to actually know them, right? We have to acknowledge them that, oh yeah, that's that lesson. But then we have to act on it, and that's where most of us fall short. We know these lessons, but we don't always act on them. And I think that's what makes these lessons so special to me is because I actually find myself acting on them. Um, yeah, so I think that's what I'm gonna end with, and then I'm gonna just share the 3 lessons with you. So, lesson number 1, everyone is equal. Now, my husband was an administrator at a private school, and he met with parents of people who ran some very famous organizations who, if I name them, you would know. And he met with people who were kids were just lucky, felt really lucky to be there because they got a full ride scholarship. He ran a team. He, talked to them, and then he also talked to the custodian. So one of the things that came out very clearly after my husband died, I asked people to tell me stories, to share their stories about him. And one of the things that came really clear to me was how he really treated everyone evenly. The word that gets used to describe my late husband the most is nice. He's so nice. And while that doesn't seem like a word that a lot of people strive to use to describe themselves, think about the depth of that word, especially when it comes from a wide range of people. If you're really nice, if people find you really nice, that means that that person that you, in your great wisdom, right, in your practice of life, you believe everyone's equal. You give them equal airtime. It doesn't matter who they are. And in fact, he was known for getting along with people who are really notoriously hard to get along with, right? So when you think about being nice, you can think about the fact that you get to give everyone a chance to hear their story. And I think that's something that I know that's something that I take into my day. I don't always take it in smoothly, y'all, because sometimes I'm like, oh, here we go. This person is like this. They always want to do it this way. I'm telling a story about them, and it comes from some of their past behavior, and then I fill in the gaps. So a lot of the story isn't true. But when I really listen to them, when I sit down and just go, hello, human who may not have slept well last night, who's maybe had a fight with their partner, who maybe got into a car accident this morning, who maybe is just feeling rough around the edges today, right? When I approach them with that attitude, it's so much easier to work with them. It's so much easier to just be patient. Now, the trick of that attitude, which is something that I'm very grateful to be able to claim, is you have to be solid in who you are. And what I mean by grateful to be able to claim, that was not always who I am, and I'm constantly working on it. It's not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel more confident in who I am as Kim Hamer than I've ever felt in my life. And so when I come from that foundation, from that solid foundation, then I'm able to really listen to someone else because whoever they are, whatever's going on in them doesn't threaten who I am. I don't need them to hear me or to listen to me so I feel heard. I don't need them to honor what I'm saying, right? All those things sometimes come from places where we don't feel comfortable about ourselves. We want validation from somebody else. So Art was really good at this. And he was so good at this, and everyone just really liked him because he just came from this place of, "Hello, human. How let's have a conversation." And that worked really well for him in his job. All right. The second lesson that I learned from my husband is that humor and boundaries go together. And I love telling this story. So my husband, as an administrator, everyone you had to teach a class, and you had to have an advisory group. An advisory group, for those of you who don't know, is a small. He was teaching upper school, so it's a small group of students who you meet with, and you just kind of make sure it's sort of like a check in. You make sure they're okay. You maybe check in with their homework. Maybe a teacher came to you to ask about some saying, hey, there's something up with the student. They want you to kind of check in with them. It's an opportunity for kids also to really get to know each other, to connect, to feel like they have people in the school. So he was running this advisory group, and the rule with the advisory group is you can't be late. You just can't be late. You need to be here on time, right? And students would have plenty of time to get there. So you need to be there on time. That's your responsibility as a student. But the punishment when you didn't show up for the advisory group on time is you would have to sing I'm a Little Teapot all the way through. And I don't know if you guys know that song. Y'all know that song. I'm a little teapot, short and stout. Here is my handle. Here is my spout. When you tip me over, pour me out. Wait a minute. When I get all steamed up, pour me out. Just tip me over and pour me out. I don't remember the words, but so you can imagine you're 15 years old. You're running late. You come into this advisory. You know you're late, or maybe you're trying to pretend that you aren't late. And my husband catches you. And it's like, you got to do it. Those are the rules. Those are the guidelines. This is what you got to do. And in that simple lesson, I learned that it's okay to set boundaries, but you don't have to be mean when someone breaks them. Right? You don't have to be nasty. You don't have to be like, well, this is the boundary and you should just do it this way. And now you're going to get one tick mark because you're bad, because you're late. You just simply need to sometimes it's better to find a humorous way to go about reinforcing the boundary. Now, at 15, singing I'm a Little Teapot in front of my other peers does not sound like a lot of fun, unless, of course, you're like into acting. But it doesn't sound like a lot of fun. So he found a great way to use humor and a little bit of embarrassment to make sure that the students would get there on time. As a father, he had really good boundaries. I always tell my kids, I'm sorry, you lost a strict parent, and they really did. My husband was very good at like, no, you're going to be in bed at 7 p.m. That's final. There's no water. There's no getting up to pee. There's none of that. You need to be in bed at 7 p.m. And when they weren't in bed at 7 p.m., so we had a rule in our house. This is sort of why we were able to stay married for 14 years. Thursday night was date night, and it was indoor date night. Sometimes we go out, but it was date night. And date night meant all three of our children were in bed at a certain time, and they were not allowed to come out of bed. That was just the rule. You could not come out of bed. And Art's thinking around this is our time as a couple. We need this time to connect, to stay married, to make sure that our kids are, are well adjusted. And we also need this time sometimes to talk about the kids. Most of the time we tried not to talk about the kids, but Thursday night was our date night. That was the night that we had our dates. And so the kids would come out, every now and then the kid would be, whoa, Dad, I need water, or Mom, I don't feel well. And Art, God bless his soul, would be like, you know what? Unless you're throwing up, you need to go to bed. And sometimes they would go to bed crying, and I would think, oh, honey, they think that we don't care about them. And he's like, no, they're bouncing up because they want to see what we're doing. Because, he was always happy to give them a hug, but they needed to go to bed. So he set these really firm boundaries in our house, which I think benefited all of us in a great deal. It benefited our marriage for sure. Now, that's not an example of using humor, but it was an example of setting a kind and loving boundary, and that's just it. Now, how this applies in my life is mostly to my time. is that I really wanna please. Sometimes I wanna, I wanna do good for everybody. I wanna help them. I wanna make them feel good. And so I have to learn to set my own boundaries to make sure that I am my number one priority every day. And that means for me to make sure I have time to meditate every single morning, and that I have time to do readings that I do, and that I have time to go for a walk every single morning, that I make sure I've got time to get dressed and to do eat a good breakfast, right? Those are the boundaries that I have to set in my day every single day, that I take a break for lunch, that I stop working at 4:30 usually. Right? Those are boundaries that I have to set every day for my mental health, right? For my marriage to myself, I guess you could say. So that's number two. Humor and boundaries are important, but really boundaries are important. Number three, you can outlast it. My daughter was born at home at 8, I think it was like 8:17 p.m. And every night for the next 3 years, she would lose her little mind at around 8:17 p.m. every single night, y'all. Now, when they're infants, you think, "Oh, I'll just nurse them or I'll rock them." Nothing seemed to help. We were living in Vegas at the time, and my husband would put on the baby Bjorn, the little feet and the little hands sticking out, all bundled up. And he would put on this big, huge Ella Bean coat, and I don't know if you know who Ella Bean, but they had the toggles, right? It's a big, heavy winter coat that had these toggles, and he would toggle the coat around her, and he would take her for a walk. And sometimes he'd be back in 10 minutes, and because she would have calmed down, and other times he wouldn't be back for 30 minutes. And I would try to do my part as the mother and take her for a walk during those times, but the screaming would drive me crazy. Just crazy. I'd wanna leave her by the side of the road. And so one night I asked him, I said, how do you do it? How do you keep walking when she's screaming her head off? Like, how do you not leave her on the side of the road?" And he looked at me and he said, "You just need to know you can outlast it." I heard him give the same advice to his youngest sister while she was going through a PhD program. And PhD programs are no joke, and a lot of people don't finish. And he told her the same thing. You just need to know you can outlast it. Right. And to me, that's such a powerful lesson, because where I'm at mentally, sometimes it's not a very fun place to be. And then I remember I just need to know I need to outlast it. I didn't think about this for a very, very, very long time. And in fact, 2 years ago, this saying came back to me. I was helping someone else. They were really having a hard time. And I just said to them, you just need to outlast it. And then that's where it came from. That's when I remembered, oh yeah, that's what Art used to say all the time. He used to say it all the time. And so that's the third lesson. And that to me is, if I can get rid of, I mean, there's really not one lesson I want to get rid of, but if I have to get rid of all, I have to choose my favorite lesson, that's the one. Because in the end, when things get really, really tough, especially, I'm going to bring this back to managers who are dealing with teams who are in crisis, right? Who are just you have a traumatized team because an employee died, or you have a traumatized team because something outside happened and everyone's kind of walking around in shock. One of the things you really need to know is you just need to outlast it. Now, that does not mean white knuckling it. That doesn't mean, oh, I'm fine, I can outlast it. But that means taking steps to take care of yourself, to take care of your team, to take care of the world if need be, and to remembering that how you're feeling right now is not going to be how you're going to feel tomorrow or even 5 minutes. So you just need to outlast it. I love that. I think that's such a powerful, powerful lesson. And it's hard to remember when we're in the middle of it, because it feels, when we are really sad, when we are really struggling, it feels like there's no outlasting this. This is going to last forever. But just remembering that you just need to outlast it. It just reminds me, right, there is an end to whatever feeling I'm having right now. I don't know when it's going to be. I don't know where it's going to be. And it's funny, I lived this after Art died. One of the things I started doing the day after he died, April 17th, was day 1. And then I had day 2 was the 18th, and day 3 was the 19th, and I kept counting. And one of my friends said, "That seems, like, really morbid, like, why are you counting the number of days he's been dead?" And I told her I was doing it because I knew on one day I wouldn't be in as much pain as I was in that moment. I didn't know when that day was. I didn't know if it would be day 10, of course not day 10, but, I didn't know if it'd be day 365, 427, 1,262. I didn't know. I didn't know what day it was, but I knew that there would be a day where I wouldn't hurt so much from him being gone, and I needed to count to get to that day. So, those are the 3 things. Those are the 3 things. 1, everybody matters, which really kinda goes along with my whole thing of you matter, right? So, everybody matters is the first one. Humor and boundaries, or boundaries and humor, and you just need to know you can outlast it. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining me. So next week, I believe I'm going to talk about my journey. Like, how the heck did I get from cancer caregiver to widow to running a consultancy that helps managers deal with a traumatized team. I'm going to share that journey next week, and then I got a really good question just 15 minutes before I hopped on here that I'm going to answer as well next week. So if you have any questions about how to work with your team who's dealing with loss or cancer, or just trauma in general, death of an employee, or an employee who has lost a spouse and they're kind of reeling around in the team, please go ahead and DM me on LinkedIn or on Facebook. I will promise that I will, 1, answer your question live, and 2, that I will not mention your name, because I know sometimes these topics are very sensitive. So yeah, that's what I will do. So please go ahead and DM me some questions. I want to thank you all for being here today. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate you. And above all else, please remember. Oh, I did want to say, hey, I'm having a book sale this month. If you're interested in buying books for your team, please reach out to me at kim@100actsoflove.com. I'm offering an 18% discount because February 18th was my late husband's birthday. So this is how I'm going to celebrate it this year. If you're interested in buying a book, please let me know. Reach out to me at kim@100actsoflove.com. 18% discount. If you buy 10 or more, we'll talk about a bigger discount. Now I can tell you how much you matter. You really matter. I really hope that you remember that and that you feel that in some sort of way, that you carry that with you today. Because who you are and how you are, there's only one of you in this whole world. And how you show up really matters to other people. Not the fake show up, not the, oh my gosh, I'm here, everything's great, my life is so dandy show up, even though your life is falling apart. But just being exactly who you are, the genuine you. People love you and need you. So please remember that you matter. All right, y'all, make it a great day, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.